What is the Marlins' single game best performance of all time?
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Marlins. I'm your host, Jeremiah Geiger. I'm a diehard Marlins fan, and I've podcasted about the team for the last 4 seasons. You can find me on Twitter at Jeremiah Geiger2, and thank you for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel and let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's show, we're going to talk about the greatest performances of all time in a single game from a Florida Marlin, from a Miami Marlin, essentially through Marlins franchise history. We're also going to talk about the first World Series that the Marlins had. The World Series matchup is set here in 2025 with the Blue Jays stunning the Mariners and the Dodgers coming off of a dominant run through the National League postseason field. It's going to be Dodgers and Blue Jays. So let's take a look at the Marlins' first World Series that they won in 7 games against the Cleveland Indians, now known as the Cleveland Guardians. I also want to preface this by saying Shohei Ohtani's performance in Game 4 might be the greatest single performance of any player in any game. It was incredible what he did on the mound with 10 strikeouts, 3 home runs in a postseason game, in a playoff game that clinched the Dodgers a trip to the World Series. It won them the pennant. That might be the greatest postseason performance. The Marlins, though, have had some really good ones as well, both regular season and postseason. So I've come up with a list of 4. 4 awesome performances that the Marlins have had throughout their tenure of being a franchise, and a couple of them are in the postseason, and then a couple are regular season performances. We're going to start, though, by talking about the postseason. And it's 2 pitchers. And I was thinking to myself, okay, we have 2 really good performances. Stat lines are incredible. The moment that these pitchers performed in were incredible. But what was the best one? And I had to decide between Livan Hernandez in the NLCS and Josh Beckett in the World Series. And ultimately, I decided that the best postseason, regular season, the best single game performance from any Marlin was Josh Beckett's heroics in Game 6 of the 2003 World Series. Complete game shutout over the mighty New York Yankees in their house, at their place. And it gave the Marlins a World Series championship, something that nobody had anticipated happening. Nobody thought that the Marlins were going to knock off the mighty Yankees. I mean, this was the height of the Yankees' powers. They had in the late 1990s won World Series. They beat the Mets in 2000, lost to the Diamondbacks, but they were routinely in the World Series, one of baseball's true dynasties. And the young wild card Marlins, who nobody expected to be good in 2003, went up to New York and they shocked the world in Game 6, clinching their second World Series behind the right arm of Josh Beckett. And so I think Josh Beckett's complete game shutout, nonetheless. He shut out the Yankees. Once that game ended, it was going to be hard for any Marlin to ever replicate that level of performance. And yes, we have some standout performances that we're going to get to. Some crazy stat lines. We're going to talk about a couple offensive stat lines later on in the show. But given the moment, given that it literally won the World Series and it avoided a Game 7, I think Josh Beckett is first on this list. Amazing. And I have a I have a World Series ball signed by Josh Beckett, part of my Marlins memorabilia. Forever a Marlins legend. You can replay the last out, a slow dribbler by Jorge Posada, the Yankees catcher. Beckett runs over, grabs it, tags him out, and that's it. The Marlins were World Series champions. It was a hard decision though, between him and Livan Hernandez, because Livan Hernandez, what he did in the 1997 NLCS was nothing short of a career defining, a career moment. It was the best moment of his career, I would say. The NLCS was tied 2-2. The Marlins, wild card team. Remember, the Marlins have never won their division. We're playing the mighty Atlanta Braves. And the Atlanta Braves had future Hall of Famer Greg Maddux on the mound. Greg Maddux, one of the best pitchers of all time. Certainly during that era, Livan Hernandez versus Greg Maddux, the odds would have been in favor of Maddux. Livan Hernandez was never known as a strikeout pitcher. In fact, over the course of his career, he only struck out 5.6 batters per 9 innings and recorded double-digit strikeouts just 4 times in his career. But on that day, in that particular game, Hernandez had the best swing and miss stuff at the most crucial moment. Livan Hernandez went a complete game, 9 innings, 3 hits, and 15 strikeouts. And the Marlins would beat the Atlanta Braves by a score of 2-1. Now, you probably have seen some of the clips of the umpire giving some generous calls to Livan, but given the moment that it was in, given that it was the playoffs, 15 strikeouts is still 15 strikeouts. I mean, he never replicated that again. He hit 10 strikeouts a couple of other times. He had 11 strikeouts another time, but he wasn't a strikeout pitcher. This was a strikeout performance out of nowhere that gave the Marlins a 3-2 lead in the NLCS. They would later go on the very next game and beat the Braves 7-4 to clinch their first trip to the World Series. Hernandez would be named NLCS MVP as well as the eventual World Series MVP. But this was an incredible moment for Hernandez, an incredible moment for the Marlins, and one that should always be recognized, always be remembered. I think it's right up there with Josh Beckett. Just incredible ace-like dominance on the mound from those two pitchers in huge moments, in nerve-wracking moments where you grow up as a kid in your backyard, in the ballpark, little league. You envision these types of moments, being on the mound in a must-win game in the postseason with a chance to win the World Series, to go to the World Series. And these guys lived their dream. So those two pitchers, Josh Beckett, Livan Hernandez, best performances, in my opinion, of all time throughout Marlins history. That was the pitching side. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about the offensive side for the Marlins. Two performances stand out to me, and they're recent. Maybe there's some recency bias, but I got to talk about them. And we're gonna discuss who these players are and what they did that should always be remembered right after this. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, you pick a bet, put down $5. If it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel's great because it gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays, try player props, follow the live lines during games, and even if you see an underdog you like, throw some money on the money line. Maybe it hits, you get a bigger payout. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action, and it's perfect for the casual fan or for the fan that loves diving into the stats. They have something for everybody. FanDuel makes the game experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. And remember, your first $5 bet, if it wins, you'll receive $300 back in bonus bets to use across the app. That's FanDuel.com and the FanDuel app. There's nothing like catching a baseball game live. You have the energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person. But actually getting tickets, that can be the tough part. And that's why you should use Gametime. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, it's easy, it's backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. And here's my favorite part, guys. All the fees are included. The price you see is the price you're going to pay at checkout. It's the best part. It's super simple. You can also see the exact view from your seat before you buy your ticket. And like I said, with the fees, you can know your total upfront. It's not going to surprise you. It's so fast. It's so simple. It just takes you a few minutes to find your ticket, whatever you like, go to checkout, buy it. There you go. So it's fast, it's cheap, it's less stressful. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. I appreciate all the everyday listeners who tune in to Locked On Marlins throughout the week. I'm recording this from downtown Phoenix, the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications, one of the edit bays. A nice little studio we got. I have a radio show later tonight, so that's why I'm down here, but thought I'd hop in and record a podcast really quickly. Best performances of all time. We talked about Josh Beckett. We talked about Livan Hernandez and just how great they were in huge moments for the Marlins. Just incredible performances when it mattered most. And then it's really hard to live up to that, especially from the hitting side of things. The Marlins in the World Series, they've only been there twice, which is more than a lot of other teams, but they've only been to the postseason 4 times. So there's not a lot of huge postseason moments to choose from where the stat sheet is just bonkers. And so these 2 games I'm going to talk about in this segment are recent, but they were from players that just had themselves a career day. The first player I'm going to talk about is Luis Arias. Now, Luis Arias in the 2023 season, as you guys probably remember, he was chasing 400 for a while. And the first game that I'm going to talk about is a special one because this was history for the Marlins. Nobody had ever done what Luis Arias did early in 2023, and that was hit for the cycle. On April 11th, 2023, in Philadelphia, in Citizens Bank Park, Luis Arias hit a double, a triple, a home run, and a single for the first ever cycle for the Marlins. It was also would be replicated later on by a guy named Xavier Edwards, who would end up replacing Luis Arias the very next season. Luis Arias, the second baseman for the Marlins, and then Xavier Edwards was his replacement after Arias was traded. X would go on to hit a cycle against the Milwaukee Brewers, both away games, by the way. I think Arias and his cycle really set the tone for the Marlins season, and for Arias' season in particular. He had a great season, hitting over 350. There was the chase for 400, whether that was realistic or not, and it was a magical year that got the Marlins into the postseason for the first time, excluding the COVID year, since that 2003 World Series winning team. There was also another awesome performance that Arias had in 2023, and something that's meaningful to me because I was there in person. So I drove up from North Carolina, where I was stationed at, to go to DC to watch the Marlins and the Nationals battle it out at Nationals Park. Arias, this was in June, I believe. Yes, mid-June. And And Arias, all he did was go up there and went 5 for 5, including a 2-run homer, something he just crushed to right field. So he showed some of the power, and then he rattled off 4 singles, including um, adding on 2 runs. He added 2 runs on the day. Just a phenomenal stat line from a phenomenal contact hitter that I did want to mention because I was there in person and also because he added a home run. And that wasn't his only 5 for 5 game with the Marlins. He also added another one later in the year with the Athletics, I believe it was. Or earlier in the season. Trying to see here, what date was that? It's his second 5 for 5 game, I believe. Anyway, I digress. That's the type of hitter that Arias is. It's just a guy that when he gets hot, he can rack up those 5 for 5, 4 for 5, those cycles, maybe mix in a homer or a double. Great player. One of the best offensive showings from a Marlins hitter. And something that, we talk about power. The Shohei Ohtani game, of course, 3 for 3, 3 homers. That was all about the power. Arias may not have had that power. He may not have that power in general. He's not a power hitter. But the way he can manipulate the bat, get those base hits, especially during that 2023 season, it was beautiful to watch. Now, this past year, we also saw another 5 for 5 game. Except this time, we did see some more power. And that was Kyle Stowers. Up at Camden Yards, on the road. Kyle Stowers could not be stopped. Literally could not be stopped. The Orioles starter, Brandon Young, had no answer for Kyle Stowers in what really was a revenge game. Because the Orioles traded him to the Marlins. He was looked at as the second piece in the Trevor Rogers trade. Connor Norby was the headliner. But on that day, it was all about Stowers' power. 3 straight home runs in 3 at-bats for Kyle Stowers. Finished the game with 5 hits. He was the first Marlins player in franchise history to go 5 for 5 and also add 6 RBIs. Something Arias didn't do was driving those runs. Stowers did, because Stowers also hit the homers. So offensively, you want to compare Ohtani and Stowers. Stowers hit 3 homers. Ohtani hit 3 homers. Ohtani didn't go 5 for 5 though. And that's something that Stowers has. Obviously, it's the postseason compared to the regular season, but certainly one of the best stat lines I can remember watching, just in terms of, hey, this guy is unstoppable, and you knew that his next at bat, he was going to do something special. He was going to continue this trajectory of playing at an MVP level, and that was just awesome to see. Brandon Young, Oriole starter. Sorry, dude, just had no answers. It reminded me of watching Bryce Harper years ago against Tom Kohler, where Tom Kohler just had no answers for Harper, who homered off him 3 times. This was much like that situation. Stowers he was dialed in that day. Completely locked in, no pun intended. The Marlins would win that game. Stowers, although he had a breakout 2025 season, was an all-star, finished the season on the injured list, but I can't wait for 2026. I can't wait to see what he does for an encore. This was his breakout year. Let's see just how far this guy can go and how far he can take the Marlins, who I expect are going to be competitive in the National League East and in the wild card race. Who knows? Maybe the division race as well. So I can't wait for that. Coming up next, we're going to recap the 1997 World Series. The World Series in 2025 is set. It's the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. But let's turn back the clocks and let's remember the Marlins against the Indians in 97. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. Nobody wants that. You want as much money as you can save. You want to be financially set. So that's why you can start using Monarch. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch will help you organize your accounts, track your spending, and get a better handle on your investments without having to touch a single spreadsheet. You can review everything with your partner, see your shared goals, and make better financial decisions together. And Monarch's visual dashboards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where your money's going and how to make it work harder for you. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on the YouTube channel. And remember, Locked On Marlins, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts, all the major podcast platforms out there, Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, you name it. Locked On Marlins is there. The 1997 World Series. So the Marlins, again, they've been to 2 World Series. They've won both World Series that they've been to, but they've only been to the postseason 4 times in their existence, including the 2020 COVID year. So if you take that away, just 3 times, but 2 out of the 3, they go in as a wild card, they make a run through the National League, and they end up winning it all. And this was the first time that happened. Against the Cleveland Indians, who were favorites, the Marlins shocked the world. Just like Josh Beckett and the 2003 squad shocked the Yankees, this Marlins team showed baseball that when a young and hungry and energetic group of guys come together and they play as a team, anything can happen. They were led by manager Jim Leyland, who was just inducted this past season into the Marlins Legends Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer, Hall of Fame manager, and did a great job leading this team to what I think is one of the most underrated World Series of all time. Nobody really talks about it too much. And that's due in part because this happened almost, 30 years ago? In a couple of years, and in 2027, it will be 30 years since this World Series. But it needs to be talked about. Baseball history is awesome. And baseball history, especially Marlins history, because this is a Marlins podcast, should always be remembered. The Marlins won it in Game 7 on a walk-off Edgar Renteria single in the 11th inning. And they were that close. They were this close to losing Game 7 in the 9th inning. They were entering the bottom of the 9th down a run. And the Indians closer, Jose Mesa, blew the save. Moises Alou led off the inning with a single and would eventually come in on a sacrifice fly by none other than Craig Counsell, who modern baseball fans, the more younger audience, he's the manager of the Cubs. That Craig Counsell was the Marlin who tied the game in the clutch and sent this one to extras. Edgar Renteria, of course, in extra innings in the bottom of the 11th with the bases loaded, hit a line drive up the middle, and the aforementioned Craig Counsell races home from third, jumping in jubilation, in celebration, and excitement, and the Marlins were World Series champs. The MVP of the World Series was Livan Hernandez. Now, Livan Hernandez, who I talked about in the first segment, he was the NLCS MVP. So he's both the NLCS MVP of 97 and also the World Series MVP of 1997. But I just think it's really funny looking at his stat line from this series because honestly, Livan Hernandez didn't pitch spectacular in the 97 World Series. He made 2 starts. He was 2-0. And remember, this is during a time in which wins and losses for a pitcher, I think, were more highly valued than they were now. Now, his second start is the one I wanted to focus on. And this was in game 5. So game 5, the Marlins won 8-7. It gave the Marlins at the time a 3-2 lead. Cleveland would force a game 7 a couple days later, but it gave the Marlins a 3-2 series lead. This was Livan Hernandez's stat line. He got the win. He went 8 innings, gave up 7 hits, 6 runs, 5 earned, 8 walks, and 2 strikeouts on 142 pitches. I mean, that doesn't happen in today's league. It doesn't happen. It would never happen. Livan Hernandez would not complete 8 innings if he's walking 8 guys. I mean, I wonder if there's ever going to be a stat line like that again in the postseason. I lean towards no. I just don't see that happening. Nonetheless, he gritted through it, 142 pitches. Rob Nen would get the save, and that was due in part to his 2 wins. I think why Hernandez got series MVP. He also pitched in game 1, and he went 5 2/3, 8 hits, 3 earned runs, 2 walks, and 5 strikeouts on 101 pitches. So pitched decent. I mean, solid. 5 2/3, 3 runs, only 2 walks. But then to go to 8 innings and 8 walks, I think is funny. Of course, Rob Nen was the closer of that team. You had guys like Gary Sheffield on the 97 World Series team, Bobby Bonilla, Darren Dalton, rest in peace, Darren Dalton. Of course, Mr. Marlin, Jeff Conine, Moises Alou, who ended up going to the Cubs. And in that second World Series appearance for the Marlins, he was the outfielder for the Chicago Cubs with the infamous Steve Bartman play at the outfield wall, right along the in foul territory, where Bartman reaches over and of course was hated by Cubs fans forever. That was Moises Alou, this time in a Cubs uniform. Charles Johnson was the catcher. Craig Counsell, we talked about him. He played a huge part in this World Series. Edgar Renteria, Devin White. There's a lot of good players on this Marlins team that would win it all. Unfortunately for the Marlins, for the fan base, it was short-lived because we know how this is, and hopefully this new era of Marlins baseball breaks this trend. But this was what really started the, I guess, reputation of the Marlins doing well, getting into the postseason, winning the World Series, and then immediately being cheap and selling off pieces of their team, because they went from World Series champion to back to the cellar, back to the abyss and the lower realms of Major League Baseball, which is what the typical casual Marlins or casual baseball fan, that's all they've known. Were the Marlins being like this, being cheap and not trying to run it back, not investing properly into a World Series winning team. Can you imagine the Toronto Blue Jays this offseason if they end up beating the Dodgers, going to the winter meetings and just start trading off their parts? I can't. But that's what the Marlins did after the 1997 World Series championship. 2 World Series titles in the franchise history. I want to see a third. I wasn't alive in 97. I was 1 year old in 2003. So for these older fans out there, these names I mentioned probably bring back a lot of awesome memories. And you got to have faith that this can happen again. And it can happen again. The Marlins can be competitive, get into the playoffs, and make a run at the World Series once again. I firmly believe that. I don't think that the organization is finished building what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve something special. They're trying to achieve consistent success. And they're on their way to doing so. And it starts in 2026. In 2026, that's the first step. That's the first year I am heading into this new Peter Bendix era, analytical era of Marlins baseball saying, hey, we have expectations now. Now, 2023, we did, or 2024 rather, I put expectations on myself or on the Marlins myself because I thought, hey, 2023 playoff team, 2024, let's run it back. Let's make the additions we need to make, and they never did. So they never really gave themselves a shot. So hopefully the Marlins can take the 17-game win improvement from 24 to 25 and keep improving in 26. And just maybe they'll get back to the World Series and win it all like they did in 97 and 2003. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Marlins. I appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, stay safe, stay locked on, and let's go fish.